It's the Cardinals versus the Wolfpack on Wednesday night down in Raleigh.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into this special Wednesday edition of this Locked On crossover episode. I am the host of Locked On Louisville, Dalton, Pence. Grayson, Boone, the host of Locked On Wolfpack, joining me today to preview the upcoming matchup tonight. Louisville Cardinals squaring off with the NC State Wolfpack, 7 o'clock Eastern time tip-off down in the Lenovo Center down in Raleigh, North Carolina. Grayson, welcome in, man.
Appreciate you having me. I wish it were on better terms for NC State basketball type of thing, but we're here. We're here.
Hey, man, I know that feeling all too well, unfortunately, over the past couple of seasons. But wanted to link up with my guys from Locked On Wolfpack to be able to preview this matchup. There's no better way to preview a matchup than have the two respective hosts discuss their teams. So we'll talk about some of the current narratives that are going on between the two teams. What is the current state of the Cardinals, the current state of the Wolfpack, and then we'll turn it over to each other to be able to ask some questions surrounding their respective teams. So, Grayson, I have to ask right now, it feels like you're just trying to stop a free fall at the moment if you're Kevin Keatts. But what's been frustrating, it seems like, is that these losses aren't really by all that much.
Yeah, I think one of the more frustrating parts about this slide is a lot of these games were one-possession losses for quite some time. You even had Duke on the ropes for, 20 to 30 minutes in Durham before that one kind of fell apart there at the end. The team isn't that far off from playing decent basketball. And that sounds crazy because we're 2-9 or 2-8 in the ACC right now. But it's just the little things that have been compounding into bigger things every single night. And it feels like NC State basically plays the same game every single game. They will be competitive for the majority of the first half, and then they slowly just wither away as the second half comes into play. So it's been a brutal stretch, of course. Dalton, you know about brutal stretches the past 2 years with Kenny Payne, but I did not think NC State saw this one coming this year.
I mean, I felt like what I was hoping. I mean, I'm a Kevin Keatts guy. He coached at Louisville, so Cardinal fans are familiar with him. He has had a really, really long career at NC State that whether or not you believed it was going to last that long, well, that's up for different discussion. But he made that incredible run last year that saved his job and extended his contract some more. But this season, I felt like, you started out the year despite playing fairly bad competition. You started out 5-0, and I was thinking, well, I mean, NC State could be one of those teams that is in the way of Louisville trying to get that top 4 seed. And then immediately after that 5-game winning streak, I mean, you had the tough stretch from Purdue, BYU to Texas. And then for whatever reason, once January rolled around, things have just been brutal. And from watching games, I'm like, hey, man, this team really isn't all that bad. It's just in the crunch time, who shows up?
Well, that is the million-dollar question, unfortunately. We don't have a definitive answer for that question. That's been a massive problem for the majority of the season. But, yeah, you talked about early parts of the year, a consistent problem, and I would say this is an NC State problem, not just a Kevin Keatts problem, but something that has been a consistent bug of the Keatts tenure is being able to take advantage of your early non-conference opportunities. NC State had 4 of those. You mentioned Purdue, BYU, Texas, and then we also had a road game out at Kansas. When you go 0 for 4 in those opportunities, and we all know that the ACC is kind of a wishy-washy mess at this point of the year. If you can't take advantage of those, you're almost already on the bubble talk, and you're not even into January yet. But then you get into ACC play, and you're all over the place. You can't rebound effectively. You can't shoot from the perimeter effectively. You don't have that lead bucket getter, which, again, I really feel has plagued this team in a massive way. It's funny, 2 of our players that we picked up out of the portal that should have been massive contributors were both Louisville players. We had Mike James and Brendan Huntley-Hatfield. Both of them are kind of dealing with injury. We actually haven't seen Mike James at all this year. He had a knee scope before the season began. But Brendan Huntley-Hatfield, when he's been in there, we just haven't quite gotten what we thought we'd be getting out of him because he was nearly averaging a double-double with the Cardinals last season. He just really hasn't seemed to be that type of player. And so I think when you boil it all down, the main problem for NC State this year has been the construction of the roster. It just hasn't been conducive enough to enough success on the court.
Yeah. And this is, like I said, there had to be high hopes coming off of that Final Four run. But one thing you probably wanted to do is make sure you could prove that, hey, look, I know it was an improbable run, but it wasn't as big of a fluke as you may believe. But unfortunately, it seems like all lights pointing to that. But you kind of mentioned it just a couple minutes ago about how I can sympathize with where you're at, because over the past couple of years, fans have turned apathetic.
Yeah.
And that's really sad, to the point to where you don't really have the emotion. It's more so, oh, well, we're a little bit closer to the season ending. And the Cardinals made the switch at the end of last year, brought in Pat Kelsey. I went on record before the season that said, I think that Louisville goes 21-10. I think that they have the talent. I think that they have a coach that's hungry enough to be able to get this team to mesh together. And Case and Pryor and Corin Johnson go down. And I'm sitting here like, well, is it time to sort of scale back on that prediction? I mean, the team is 6-5 in December, and then all of a sudden they rip off a 10-game winning streak. And the vibes are high again. And right now they're currently sitting at 18-6, and barring something catastrophic, potentially making me look like a genius for the first time in a very long time. So I think that, the dynamics are completely different. For the Cardinals, the month of February is about eliminating bad losses. And the NC State loss wouldn't be catastrophic because it would technically be a quad 2 opportunity for the Cardinals. But Louisville lost a quad 2 opportunity to Georgia Tech earlier this month. They went from a projected 5 seed down to a 7 seed. So you see sort of the bias, if you will, against the ACC, especially in the net rankings, but also in bracketology. So the longer that Louisville can go eliminating the possibility of adding another bad loss onto their resume, and I know that NC State might be a better team than 9-14, but they are 9-14, and that's all that the committee will see. So I think for the Cardinals, it's just a matter of, okay, you need to do what you can with a target on your back to handle business and move forward that way, really.
Yeah, I mean, quads be damned. I can tell you firsthand, if you lose to NC State, it's a bad loss, whether it's a Q2 or whatever it is. The way these two teams are playing right now, it is two ships passing in the night. They could not be more different in the types of seasons.
Oh, it's going good.
Yeah, exactly. It could not be, drastically more different than it already is. And two of the things I think really worry me the most, and we'll probably get into it later in the episode as well, but Louisville rebounds at a high rate, and they can shoot it from the perimeter, light it up from the perimeter, I should say, when you have someone like Rain Smith. NC State really, really, really struggles in those two categories in particular. Rebounding has been a disaster this year. We've been out-rebounded in the majority of the games we've been losing. We've even had games where we won the rebounding battle and still found a way to lose by 10. It's that kind of snake-bitten, mentality, I guess you could say, for this team right now. And then the three-point shooting, who knows? It is a complete coin flip every single game. If we're going to shoot, 15% or possibly sniff close to 40, it's a total coin flip. We have no idea what to expect night in and night out. And in Louisville, this would be a very bad loss if you find a way to lose to NC State.
Very true. Very true. If it's not one thing, it's another. It feels like for the NC State Wolfpack. On the next segment here in just a minute, we're going to turn the floor over to Grayson to be able to ask any questions that he has about the Louisville Cardinals, what Pat Kelsey's team is going to show on the court, and much more coming up on this special Locked On crossover episode on this Wednesday game day. After the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get back into a routine. Whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look to start the year, WayFair has everything you need, all within your budget. Look, I got a puppy a couple months after moving into a house, and I'll be honest, I wasn't taking that into consideration when I got my first round of furniture, and unfortunately it is time for my second round. WayFair's free and hassle-free delivery for larger items makes it even more convenient. There's something for every style and every home. WayFair makes it easy to tackle your New Year's goals, All you have to do to give your home the refresh it needs, go to WayFair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. WayFair. Every style, every home. Thank you so much for making both Locked on Louisville and Locked on Wolfpack part of your daily routine. Just a reminder, the shows are free and available on all streaming services, including YouTube, 5 days a week. Your teams, respectively, every day. Grayson, I will turn the floor over to you, my man. Any questions that you have about the Louisville Cardinals, the floor is yours.
Well, I'll go. First one here is a little bit of a vibe check, and I'd assume the vibes are good, seeing that you're sitting in the top 3 of the conference here. But first year of Pat Kelsey, in my opinion, I think he should be a front runner for the ACC Coach of the Year. What has it really felt like seeing the depths of what has it felt like seeing the depths of the Kenny Payne era immediately translate into a new Pat Kelsey era?
It is when I say this, a breath of fresh air. I mean like a big, it has been, like I said, I use the term apathetic, and that's really what it was the past couple of years. The reality is it goes further back. The Cardinals hadn't made the tournament since 2019, before COVID. Right. They hadn't won a tournament game since Donovan Mitchell was on campus in Louisville back in 2017. So Louisville basketball fans are just completely desperate to get back to that level. So to see Pat Kelsey in a year where he had to, on the fly, get 13 new guys and get them to buy into what he's selling, but also for a coach that's never been at the ACC level, also be able to adjust his coaching style to the Power 4 ranks. So to be 18-6 on February 12th, heading into the last 7 games of the regular season, I think that the vibes are incredible. I don't think that anyone really foresaw this coming. I had them at 21-10, but right now they're projected to surpass that. So everyone has to be on cloud 9 at the moment.
Aside from just purely winning a lot more games, what would you say has been the most impressive part of Kelsey's first season?
I think it's the attention to detail. One thing that Louisville fans completely despised was it felt like the lack of connection to the coaching staff. It felt like Kenny Payne didn't really understand Louisville fans. It goes back to, I'll give you an example. Mike Woodson ran a zone at the back half of the Indiana game last year in which Louisville lost, and Kenny Payne got up on the podium and said, "He tricked me." And everyone's like, "Excuse me? He did what? He tricked you with a zone?" And I understand that Mike Woodson runs more man-to-man, but being tricked by a zone, that's just one example of how it felt like Louisville was never prepared for a game. And to see the out-of-timeout sets that are run on offense, the defense continually improving, I think it's just the attention to detail in almost every aspect of the program, not just on the court, but off the court as well.
So I mentioned Rain Smith earlier, shooting just a touch under 40% from beyond the perimeter. You have Chucky Hepburn shooting nearly 34%. I see the team as a whole shooting 32%. From all the times that I've watched Louisville this year, it feels like it should be a lot closer to 40 because they've been able to rain on teams based on what I've seen. Do you think the three-point threat for this team is the most dangerous aspect?
I think it has to be when you have Rain Smith, who's having a historical season. On the 40%, it's pretty close to 10 attempts a game. Like, he takes a lot of three-point shots, and it's one of those to where if you're a Louisville fan, when he pulls up to shoot, you anticipate it going in. It's getting to that level. Unfortunately for the Cardinals, as everyone else has kind of been streaky, Chucky has been probably the most consistent outside of Rain in terms of volume shooting, but everyone else, it's been, okay, who's going to step up and hit three-point shots now? I honestly think that they shoot better on the road. I don't have the splits in front of me, but it feels like the Cardinals, for whatever reason, they shoot better on the road. So I think that I would probably be more specific, and that's that Rain Smith has such a huge gravity in terms of guarding him that it opens up a ton of open shots. And if Louisville's hitting their open shots, then it's a whole different conversation. But one of the main trends is that the Cardinals sometimes struggle to just hit point blank open shots. So
Smith's ability to get to the rim also off the pump fake I think makes him even more deadly. Next question here. Where was I going with this? The rest of your schedule here. On paper, it seems pretty easy for Louisville to essentially win out. And I know we had that conversation on the ACC squad, and I think y'all ran into a tough one against Georgia Tech. But when you're looking down the final stretch of your regular season here, 6 or 7 games, what do you think the reasons they will win out, or maybe some more speed bumps that they might run into?
Well, I think that what gets overlooked is the sense that college basketball is so unpredictable, especially when you play a conference game on the road, and the majority of their games in February have been on the road. Now, the devil's advocate to that is that Louisville seems to play better on the road. They haven't been as sharp in February as they were in January. They've had to deal with some injuries. Chucky Hepburn's status is he's likely to play against NC State, but it's not confirmed. I think people think he's going to play. James Scott, I mean, he got his front 2 teeth knocked in against Miami. Immediately had to go to dental surgery. He missed basically half of the first half, the entire of the second half. So it's just been terrible injury luck. I think Louisville gets both of those guys back, which they're going to need for the end of the season. On paper, Louisville's going to be projected to win every single game for the remainder of the year. However, we saw against Georgia Tech, sometimes the team you're supposed to beat is not always the team that you do beat. So I think it's just a matter of staying in the moment with this. January was some tougher games. February, it's a different situation. You have a target on your back. Teams that aren't going to make the NCAA tournament are looking to spoil your season. So I don't think that there's really one specific answer to that other than just making every single game the most important game of the season. I think that this program lives off of that culture, is making everything you do the most important thing in this program's history. And I credit Pat Kelsey and the coaching staff for being able to implement that culture. So I was talking about could Louisville go undefeated, and then immediately they lost to Georgia Tech. So I'm not going to make that mistake again. Only thing I know is that they have at least one more game on their schedule, and that's NC State tonight.
Yeah, I mean, to your benefit, we also discussed Clemson potentially winning out, and they immediately lost to Georgia Tech as well. So you're still right there. Earlier, you mentioned the A word, apathetic, and that is the way that NC State fans are feeling about the rest of the Wolfpack season. When you're looking at NC State coming up on this Wednesday evening, what potentially scares you? Is it being that potentially you overlook them and you're on to the rest of the schedule? You know, is this the game that NC State finally puts it all together and breaks their losing streak? What worries you the most as a Cardinal fan?
I mean, I think it's this thing that Louisville, for the first time in a long time, they have a target on their back. They're top 3 in the standings. Teams are going to play harder when they play Louisville because of where they sit in the standings. And NC State, a team that unless they go on another run in the ACC tournament and you know, cut down the nets in that conference championship, they're going to make the tournament. So it feels like all the pressure's on Louisville. Right. So that's kind of where I get a little bit nervous, and couple that with me watching that game against Duke, NC State controlling that game for a good portion of it. And also, I mean, yeah, they've lost 8 in a row, but they've kept it very, very close. All it takes is for one guy to start hitting shots at the end of the game, and you might be able to snap that streak. So I think it's what worries me about Notre Dame, and that's that you're playing against teams that maybe there's some internal pressure on Kevin Keatts, but for the team, there's nothing to lose for them. They're not going to make the tournament. If they lose, oh well. If they win, heck yeah. For Louisville, there's much more to lose. So I don't really worry about them overlooking a game. I feel like Pat Kelsey does a good job of keeping these guys in the moment, and I think that they understand the task at hand. It's just a matter of, hey, man, you can go on the road in conference play and lose on any given night. NC State has shown that even though they've been losing, they're not your average 9-14 squad. They still can beat you. Georgia Tech was 9-10 when they, or I'm sorry, 9-11 when they played Louisville and beat them. So it's just a matter of bringing your A game in that situation. So
yeah, I think that nothing to lose mentality is where you currently find NC State. They had a players only meeting in between the Cal loss and the Stanford loss. And in that Stanford game that we saw on Saturday, there was visibly more fight. There's more want to. And to do all of that and, you know, inspire some kind of camaraderie despite a train wreck of a season here, to still lose by 1 point. The fight is not dying, though. That's at least something that we're seeing from this NC State team. They will not die easily at the very least. So perhaps they can find a way to snap this win streak, or perhaps they can find a way to snap this losing streak against Louisville. But if Louisville comes out on time and focused, I find that hard to believe. We
shall see. When we come back, I get to ask Grayson all of the questions that I have about NC State instead of having to do a solo episode where I try to act like I am an expert of NC State. I will let the actual expert give an idea of what Louisville could potentially run into on Wednesday night. Here coming up in just one moment. And once again, I will say ACC fans, I want to take this time to thank you all for making both Locked On Louisville and Locked On Wolfpack your first listens of the day, respectively. Just a reminder, both shows are free and available on all streaming services, including YouTube, 5 days a week, your teams every day. Dalton Pence with Locked On Louisville, Grayson Boone, Locked On Wolfpack, Cardinals and the Pack square off 7 o'clock Eastern time tonight down in Raleigh at the Lenovo Center. Grayson, 8-game losing streak. We talked about potentially trying to snap that. First of all, let's go back to this losing streak because none of the losses, I find it pretty interesting, are by more than 12 points. The Wolfpack have kept it pretty close. What has been the main issue or issues that have plagued the NC State squad and not allowed them to get in the win column since January?
In my personal opinion, one of the biggest problems has been rebounding. We're actually one of the worst rebounding teams in the entire conference, and we're in like the low 300s in terms of rebounding in the entire country. And when you allow teams to repeatedly get multiple chances on the offensive boards, those type of moments in late games and late second half, it kills you. And I think that's really what you've seen over the course of this stretch. I also mentioned defending the perimeter. NC State's had really a hard time finding their best shooter and putting a guy in his face at all times. And I think that really terrifies me about Rain Smith on Wednesday evening. But it's just been a multitude of errors, whether it's been finding the correct rotations or what's really effective. We've had a couple injuries, like I mentioned. Brandon Huntley-Hatfield has been in and out some point this year. He's potentially able to go on Wednesday night, but that may be a game-time decision. It's just been a comedy of errors, whether it's, Dontrez Styles has been one of our more consistent players, but there's nights, he'll shoot us out of a game if you give him enough opportunities. Trey Parker, I think, is a name to know for Louisville fans. He's really been coming on strong. He's a true freshman at NC State this season. He's seen an uptick in playing time. The game is starting to slow down a little bit for him now. It was a little bit too fast there in the beginning. It's just a true freshman, but the game is coming to him now. He's able to find his outside shot. He's less of a liability on the defensive end. That's why you see more of him now. I still think it's kind of unknown what you're going to see from NC State on Wednesday evening, but it's a lot of here. It's a lot of there. It's truly just all over the place. It's been a mess of a season.
You mentioned Brandon Huntley-Hatfield, and I think it's interesting that this is the closest that he's gotten to playing in, however long that he's been out, and he's questionable for this game. If you had to give me a percentage on how likely you believe it is that he does suit up and play this game in some capacity for the Wolfpack, what percentage would you put that at?
I'd give you like 65%. I think I've heard he's been rehabbing. It's a shoulder issue. It's some type of shoulder issue. I heard he's been rehabbing it basically twice a day, every day. I would think he might be ready to go in this one. I don't know if it'll be in limited capacity. And to be quite honest, he hasn't really provided much when he's fully healthy either this year. He's really been a little bit of a letdown in terms of the player we thought we'd be getting. But if he's able to go, of course, it will be a boost because we need all the help we can get in the front court.
Yeah. I have kind of gone back and forth on this question in terms of what I believe, and I'm really interested to hear what you think from your spot of covering the team. On the last Locked On ACC squad that you and I were both on, we talked about the ACC coaching carousel. Leonard Hamilton stepping down after the season, Tony Bennett, Jim Larinaga. There are going to be a good amount of openings in the ACC, and I wonder, with the run that Kevin Keatts had at the end of last season, and it extended his contract by, I think, 2 years or whatever, and saved his job, frankly. Now that you have this season, do you get the sense that he's coaching for his job at the end of the season, or is he for sure going to be back next year?
I have essentially been told that this year is about as free as a free space can possibly get. It's a mulligan year, so to speak. And I think next season, he will enter that year on the hot seat. If you have a similar type of year next year to this year, that might be it for Kevin Keatts and Raleigh. But that's just fair. An unbelievable run last year to win 5 games in 5 days. And the first of those started with Louisville. In fact, we were losing, I think, with like 4.5 minutes left.
Yeah,
his job was very much on the line. He was about 4 minutes away from being out at NC State. And then history went on from that point on. But to look at this team now, and for NC State, I guess also in the Keatts tenure, the last 4 to 5 years, we're looking at potentially 2 of the worst seasons in school history, with an ACC championship and a trip to the Final Four sandwiched all in between. It could not be more NC State. There's a saying amongst NC State fans, it's NC State blank. It's an S word. We thought that it died with Keatts winning the ACC title and, getting rid of the demons, breaking the curse. But this feels very much like NC State blank. To have a massive letdown on this proportion after making a run like last year, it couldn't happen to a more normal fan base than NC State.
From an X's and O's standpoint, Louisville has struggled this season with defending the three-point ball, and it looks like NC State is somewhat of a respectable team. When you look at the numbers, it's not great, but they can hit shots. It's sort of like Louisville, is that they can be streaky. What can you kind of tell me about the Wolfpack from the perimeter?
Well, it's been very shaky, and I think some of those numbers are probably inflated by the last week to 2 weeks of games. Trey Parker's been a little bit of a breath of fresh air from deep. He was like 5 for 8 this last game against Stanford, but it's been relatively bad. You haven't had a consistent outside shot. Dontrez Styles has probably been the most consistent. Jaden Taylor had his name in the sun for a little bit. He's kind of tapered off a bit. Michael O'Connell was our one of the names to know last year in the run. Of course, he hit that shot against Virginia in the conference tournament. Really, really tough year for Michael. I think he's only averaging like 6 points a game, less than 30% from beyond the perimeter. There's not much to respect in the Wolfpack shooting the three, but it just depends. Like if Dontrez Styles can get hot, he can sink 5 of them. Or Trey Parker, for example, he can sink 5 of them. It just really depends day to day. But if you let the Wolfpack get enough open looks, I think they can make you sweat just a little bit. But to be honest, Dalton, I don't have any faith that NC State can close out a game down the stretch with consistent three-point shooting.
Selfishly, I hope that remains a trend. I hate it for you all. I know how it feels, and it's not a feeling that I would wish on an ACC friend of mine. Quickly, give me your score prediction for tonight's game.
Well, we've talked so much about NC State being able to hang in some of these games. They've been relatively close. I've been very impressed with Louisville this year. And again, if they do stay focused, if they're on task here and not looking ahead, I don't see any reason they won't handle business. Give me Louisville 83-72. It's still relatively close, but 83-72.
I was pretty close. I went Louisville 79, NC State 71. Okay. So fairly close. I think that Louisville wins this game. I don't think it's going to be a comfortable win because NC State has taken Duke down to the wire. They've really competed well with Clemson, and they've had a ton of close losses. I think Louisville will win this. It's going to be close, though. However, just a heads up to Louisville fans, I will be out of town until Thursday afternoon. So the recap of this game, don't panic when it doesn't come out Thursday morning. It will publish on Thursday evening. And I have to say this because there will be people in the comments that are like, where's the episode at? I understand. I apologize. It's not ideal. I appreciate your patience, but just wanted to give you.
What a blessing that must be, though. Louisville basketball.
It's been a while, man.
Yeah.
Dude, over the past couple of years, when I've talked about basketball, it's like, oh, it's a basketball podcast. We're not going to click on that and listen to it. But that's just been the reality of the situation. But Cards and Wolfpack tonight, 7 o'clock Eastern time. All your coverage here on the Locked On Podcast Network. He's Grayson Boone from Locked On Wolfpack. I'm Dalton Pence, Locked On Louisville. We'll see you right back here following Vintage ACC Sports.